Dear viewers and followers, welcome back to a new lesson from the educational lessons of the Ameen software for accounting and warehouses. As we will complete what we started in the previous videos about value-added tax, and we will talk about the method of entering returns, sales returns or purchase returns. I will now add a sales invoice, and then we will see what is required when entering a sales return invoice from this invoice. As it is known, the customer's name, warehouse, payment method, items with quantities and prices must be recorded. As for the price, you can now record the price or the price including tax. Note that when entering the price, a tax will be added to this price. However, when entering the price including tax, the tax will be calculated from this price. I will save this invoice. Now that the sales invoice has been added, I will add a sales return invoice from this invoice in the traditional way. Of course, you must register the customer's name, warehouse, and payment method, and register the items with quantities and prices. Note that the tax will not be calculated directly. To calculate the tax or not, we must click on the More button. Fill in the original invoice number and the original invoice date. Where you can write the date or use the calendar icon to select the month and day. After clicking the OK button, we will notice that the value-added tax will be calculated if the registered date is after the registration date. VAT will not be charged if the date is before the registration date. Of course, you must click on the Add button and then Save to save the return invoice. This is the traditional way to add a sales return invoice. You can also add a sales return invoice in the second way, which is from the Return from Invoice tab. As explained earlier, you must specify the original invoice form and the return invoice form and the original invoice number. Then press the Read button. We need to specify the return quantity. This is all that is required to be filled in this way for the value-added tax. Of course, in addition to the rest of the non-mandatory fields that were explained previously. Then click on the Add button and then Save. After saving, we will notice that a sales return invoice has been added. If we click on the More button, we will notice that the original invoice number field and the original invoice date field have been filled in automatically. In this way, sales return invoices can be added. Of course, in the same way, purchase return invoices can be registered. It should also be noted that if any invoice for an expense is returned and recorded in the vouchers and not the invoices, its accounting effect can also be recorded in the vouchers. Since we recorded in the previous lesson a voucher for stationary expenses, we saw how the tax is calculated when recording the voucher. Suppose some of this stationery is returned. So I will record a reverse voucher for this expense. As we explained earlier, the account and the vendor of this expense must be registered. Since it is a return, the expense account should be credit. After recording the value and the name of the supplier, and since the date of the voucher is later than the date of registration in the tax, we will notice that the tax value will be calculated. Accordingly, the value of the debit account must be recorded with the value-added tax. Since this voucher is a return of a previously recorded expense, we must record the original invoice number and the original invoice date. This voucher cannot be added before registering this data. Note that VAT will be calculated when entering the original invoice date, on a date later than the registration date. However, VAT will not be charged when entering a date prior to the registration date. After filling in all the required information, you must click on the Add button and then Save. In the end, all these procedures and controls are important because they affect tax reports, so they should not be underestimated. I hope you like this video and share it so that everyone can benefit.